Hey, what's going on? Hopefully, this is working. I'm Brendan Marcello, CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports. I am on the road, reliant on hotel Wi-Fi that wasn't working properly. So now I'm on my hotspot on my phone, and I don't have 5G um, access, so to speak, on my phone right now. So hopefully, that's not too much of a problem. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. Technical difficulties. I'm working on my laptop instead of in my home studio, obviously, with being on the road. So my home studio is so much easier for me to deal with. But anyway, we're here, and it's been a crazy day. I did not expect that when I got on the airplane, one of my first two airplanes, that I'd be having to cover a story about what's going on back in my home state of Arkansas, where right now, it seems like we've seen a shift in the NIL space as far as like the balance of power. For the longest time, the balance of power has been really not the longest time, but the balance of power has been in favor of the players lately, because of all these lawsuits you've seen and going against the NCAA, going against these schools, and the ability for players to say, "Hey, listen, you can no longer tell us what our value is. You can't hold us back from telling us how much we can make or deserve to make, for that matter." Um, and so, sorry, let me take my little Zen out. Bad habit. It's my coffee. But we saw kind of a sea change, didn't we? A week ago, or was it 2 weeks ago, with Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee, where, listen, there's contract disputes in the NIL space going on almost daily, especially when you get closer to transfer portal windows in the winter and spring months. But this one kind of took on a completely different tone because, one, Nico Iamaleava is such a high profile quarterback, a player. And two, they were nearing the end of spring practices. They were under negotiations. And meanwhile, you had reportedly Nico being shopped around to other schools, asking schools if they would be interested in him. Meanwhile, Tennessee had no idea about this. And then reportedly, another coach or two from a other program said, "Hey, did you know that your your quarterback's being shopped around?" So Tennessee finds out about this. Word starts leaking out. The contract negotiations kind of hit a wall, and then the very next day, Nico holds out from practice. And from then on, it was pretty much decided that this can't continue. And so Tennessee and Nico moved on. Shortly thereafter, Nico transferred to UCLA. And then we had another kind of smaller explosion, but one that I think maybe would have maybe far-reaching implications even further. And that's Nico's brother, his younger brother, Madden Iamaleava, who had been committed to UCLA for the longest time, but opted to flip to Arkansas on National Signing Day, December 4th, 2024, and signed a deal there. And then when his brother opted to transfer to UCLA, he walked into Sam Pittman's office, said, "Hey, I went in the transfer portal. I'm feeling homesick," is what my sources told me. And they let him go in the transfer portal. And before his name even officially was entered into the transfer portal at about 10:45 a.m. Central Time Tuesday, which is today, it had already been reported Monday night, Monday evening, that he was headed to UCLA. We all know like there's tampering going on and all that type of stuff. And I'm not saying this was something like where UCLA had something worked out or anything, but it's just kind of one of those situations where it's almost like that this small little thing has been blown up even further because it's now attached to the Nico saga. And when you're involving the Imaliava family right now, it's kind of easy to lump into that. And so I believe that Arkansas saw an opportunity here to strike. And for that matter, make a message known that would reverberate across college sports. And that message was, most of us have contracts in these NIL deals that are beholden to the school with saying we're going to do these certain things for you and pay you this, but also that the players would have certain obligations, including if you want all of your pay, you have to stay here for the full year or however long your deal is. And also, you will owe us buyout money if you leave before this contract expires. Now, of course, these type of deals have come under a lot of scrutiny. There's been a lot of conversation of whether this is actually legal under the current landscape, especially before revenue sharing, which is a completely different thing, but it has a lot of tentacles on this, goes into effect July 1st if the House settlement is approved, which it probably will be here later this week or early next week, from what I've been told. And so the question is are these schools legally able to go to court, take these players to court if they don't get their buyout money? And Madni Amaliava, based off my reporting, was getting paid somewhere in the neighborhood of about $500,000 for a year as part of a 1 year deal at Arkansas. And so he was only on campus for what, 3.5, 4 months. So he's got about 8 months left on that deal. And the boilerplate contract language that I'm privy to, most of these deals require players to quote unquote pay back and buyout money 50% of their remaining deal if they choose to go to another school. So they can take their own NIL rights and be able to take it and transfer it to their new school. Now, this hasn't been really come to light a lot, but some schools just kind of that they're going to, some of those schools just on the back end just go ahead and give the money and pay the buyout, whether it's on the front end or back end to these players, so they don't have to worry about it, and the other school doesn't have to worry about it. The other thing is a lot of schools, and most of them, in fact, all of them, have not really pursued legal action against players if they don't get their buyout money, or for that matter, their first payment in the buyout money. But it appears that could be changing. And why do I say that? Because Arkansas AD Hunter Yurachek made his statement today saying, hey, Arkansas Edge, our NIL collective here, I've given them clearance to pursue any means necessary within legal boundaries to move ahead and pursue anybody that isn't living up to their NIL deal, which includes um, anyone who owes buyout money. And this is really the first time we've had a public figure, an administrator at a school, just come out and straight up say, hey, you can't just leave us and expect to just say, that's the end of the contract. I'm not paying that buyout. Um, and this is an interesting pivotal moment, I think, because deals, NIL contracts right now are bigger than ever, and they will be in this small window between January of this year all the way up till July, because a lot of these collectives, a lot of these schools are trying to get as much money into their collectives to pay players before revenue sharing goes into effect July 1, which is a separate piece of the pie. As you guys know, revenue sharing is about $20.5 million for these power conference schools, which they have to divvy up among all their student athletes, with about 75% of that 20.5 million going to football players. And then it's up to the coaches how they divvy that up. So if you like wanted to take the NFL model, a top tier quarterback would probably get paid about $3.1 million based off my math. In the NFL, it seems like 20 to 24% of your collective money ends up going to your big time quarterback. And so that would equal to about $3.1 million because again, 75% of this $20.5 million, not all of that is going to football. So only 75% of it's going there. So a lot of these players see an opportunity here. One, let's get a big NIL contract now, and then get some even more money in the revenue sharing when it starts in July. Some of these schools are kind of building into these contracts of, well, here's what you're going to end up getting paid when revenue sharing gets enacted, but here's some money on the front end from NIL, or going forward, here's what your NIL package would look like in addition to all that. Ugh. So we're in an interesting space here. Um, does this open the door for more schools to pursue legal action potentially against players if they're not getting their money? And it's a interesting topic of conversation. You've seen a lot of debate on it on social media, especially among legal types. people we've talked to at CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports over the last several months, because these buyout language is really nothing new, though it's newer in these contracts. And, you know, all this is about, these collectives pay this money to these players for their NIL rights, right? So they surrender that to a certain extent. And um, the idea is with these contracts, simply put, if you're going to say the University of Michigan, they have your NIL rights. You can't just leave and say I'm going to Iowa and they have my NIL rights now. No, under contract, that's not the case. And earlier this year, back in January, you guys saw in Wisconsin a defensive back who ended up just withdrawing and then went to Miami without entering the portal. Well, he couldn't enter the portal because Wisconsin was not allowing him, saying we're not going to release him from our contract, the NIL rights. And so that most likely will probably end up being our first like legal challenge we actually see, because that's been like pushed to the edge. Even though Wisconsin hasn't really come out and said anything as far as, hey, we're going to take this to court or whatever, that seems the most likely situation where we might see our first like very public clash, maybe some type of settlement, but maybe something going to court. More so than this Madden Iamaliava stuff with Arkansas. But in doing my reporting for this story for CBS Sports today, I discovered from talking to some folks in the industry that several schools are kind of ramping up and preparing to potentially pursue legal action against players that have left their programs and aren't paying buyouts. In the past, these programs haven't really pursued but that buyout money because one, they don't really want the negative headlines to be seen as someone that's like trying to pilfer money out of a student athlete, as they say, pockets, a teenager's pockets. Um, but again, optics are everything in college athletics in a lot of ways. And we got to a point now with the Iamaliava saga just in this last 2 weeks where I think administrators feel a little bit more confident in saying, this is a two-way street. This is not a one-way street anymore. And if you want to be paid all this money, you got to have some responsibility with it. And so you're seeing kind of a sea change, a change here. Because as I mentioned, you didn't see a lot of people, siding with administrators and programs and all that over the players. And yet here we are. I think that this Iamaliava situation with Nico and Madden is kind of opened the door for that. So interesting times. I'm checking here the chat and everything. Hey, thanks. There looks like there's 567 of you tuned in here. I don't know if that's cumulative or wherever. Uh, we're streaming live somewhere. That certainly looks like a good thing. Uh, I'm going to double check just to make sure I'm streaming. Again, I'm having some really bad problems here with my internet. Okay, yeah, we're streaming good. Okay. Four Verticals podcast. Thanks for dropping in. Um, Chip Murphy off of Vex saying I'm coming across okay, good. Austin Scott saying it's back. Yes. If you guys, I mean, some of you might remember back when I was a beat writer, just covering Auburn instead of college football as a whole. I used to do these little streams called Auburn After Dark, where I get on at any hour late in the night, usually later than what I am right now, and I would just shoot uh, the ish, whatever, with everybody and just talk about Auburn and things I was hearing and answer questions, interact with you. If you know me well, you know that I'm very passionate about my job. I'm very passionate about college football and maybe not so much the NIL space and the legal battles and all that type of stuff. I'm not I'm not in the trained legal landscape, though. And I got my start covering government reporting. I was a government reporter actually way back in the day. But I like talking X's and O's more than dotting I's and crossing T's on NIL contracts. But that's the big story right now. And that's the big thing everybody's is talking about. It's just like how much is this player getting paid and what kind of deal are they getting? And the transfer portal is wide open right now. It closes here in a couple of days and still some movement, some churning. And I want to give a shout out to our Matt Zenitz and Chris Hummer. I think they're the best, absolutely, in the business and covering transfer portal and the transactional space in college football and college sports as a whole. They're always on top of that stuff. I can't imagine the hours they work and keeping their phones on and everything. I know it's a tremendous, tremendous hassle, and they do their jobs brilliantly. So yeah. Hey, Austin. Yeah, we'd be pushing about midnight. Yeah, you're right. We'd be doing that, uh, going live most of the time, we're a little bit after midnight. Um, Austin also asked here. I don't think I can publish these on my stream, but I'll just repeat the question. Austin asked, "What's the immediate impact we'll see once the House issue gets settled?" um, well, one, I think the most immediate impact will be roster cuts, and not just football, but across all college athletics. It's been mentioned, and I believe it's actually in the language in the House settlement, or at least one of the lawyers in that has mentioned that they believe up to 5,000 athletes across all these sports across the land will end up being cut. So you're going to have a lot of athletes without homes, or universities to call home. And so you saw the Judge Wilkin in the Northern District of California, who's overseeing all this in the settlement proceedings. She said, "Hey, why can't we grandfather in the players who are on campuses now? I'll let them exhaust their eligibility and remain on scholarship. And then we'll start after that. You kind of have temporarily exceeded roster limits. But the word is that that's not gonna happen now. And so it looks like up to 5,000 athletes are going to end up being cut. And you see, look across college football, you're probably looking at 20 to 25 players on average. And most of those are walk-ons, if not all are walk-ons, being cut from rosters. And that's terrible. One, because can you imagine being a player who, you're not necessarily on scholarship, but your dream has always been to play college football or at least be part of a team and help them win a championship, whether you're on the practice squad or anything like that. And then you're told, "Hey, we don't have a spot for you. Sorry, you got to go." And then you're just a regular student again. Or you say, "Hey, maybe I can go play football at a D2 school." And you don't quite get the experience you would have gotten as a walk on at, say, the University of Alabama, or the University of Texas or something like that. It's just, it gets terrible. But the thing is like, no matter what was going to happen with this house settlement, it was not going to make everybody happy, I should say. Um, but it's just the beginning. I think what you're going to see is also, is depending on the language of the House settlement, you're going to see lawyers coming out of the floorboards say, I mean, because you could take this any numbers of ways and say, "Hey, I don't believe football players are getting paid enough of the pie of this $20.5 million. They should get more based off of the TV ratings they draw." Or, "I don't believe the women's basketball team is getting paid enough based off of their success and the kind of numbers they're drawing in the postseason in March Madness." Um, Title IX issues, of course, tied to that as well. So what do you do? Do you give 50% of the money to college football players in your program? Well, then you're probably going to get a lawsuit from a football player or two. Um, it's going to be a mess potentially. And what you're going to see is, I think, what you're going to see is you're not going to see the lawsuits against the NCAA as we're seeing now, like practically every day, it feels like. You're going to see the lawsuits filed against individual schools and maybe even coaches. And I do wonder if schools are prepared for that completely. A lot of them, of course, have put all their eggs in the basket of, we got to get legal protection, some type of antitrust exemption, and get this House settlement codified through Congress. And that's not happening right now. And no one knows if it's going to happen. Well, hopefully it goes very well. It's kind of what I try to do in the springtime. It's a really good time to go around to schools, talk to coaches, talk to administrators and stuff, even, off the record. Don't even, write a story from it, but just getting to see what's going on and, reconnect. And, this is how I kind of split up the college football season for me, is that right now we're ending spring, obviously, spring practices. Then after this, we enter what I call business season. Um, And of course, that spring practice thing concludes the transfer portal and all that. But in May is what I call like business season. That's when all these conferences have their spring meetings. They potentially change legislation within their own conferences. Heck, we got, for example, the SEC for what, a third straight year discussing whether we should go play, 9 games in the conference or 8 games. Is that going to change at all? Uh, we'll see. They've been saying that they wanted to see how the college football playoff would affect strength of schedule and all that. And we'll see if that actually changes the way they go about looking at it. Um, anyway, I might be breaking up here, so my apologies. If I am breaking up, just let me know. Someone put in a chat if I'm breaking up. If I'm choppy, please let me know. Um, we've had 637 people in here. Thank you so much for dropping in. Again, I hope to make this more of a regular thing, where I just come in, talk to you about what I'm hearing, things I've been reporting on, and then also answer any of your questions. When I did these years ago, they got very popular over a period of time. A lot of uh, kinks to work out, but we got a lot of good feedback, and I love just like chatting with everybody. Um, Poor Verticals podcast asks for EA College Football 26. What real life aspects could you see being added to this year's game? Um, I haven't done much reporting on that. I've been kind of stonewalled, I think, by EA since I was getting some stuff out of their camp, and whatever. It is what it is. That's just how it goes sometimes. But you know, it certainly looks like I saw an announcement that Metallica is going to be part of the game this year. So that's big. I wonder what kind of music they'll have there, but also, are we going to get Enter Sandman for Virginia Tech? That certainly seems like it's going to happen. And Metallica has been much more open to sharing their music. I don't know if you old heads like me, but you remember the days of Napster where Metallica sued Napster and all that stuff and really is against it. And now these days, I play Fortnite from time to time, and I was playing Fortnite a few months ago, and they had like Metallica skins on there and music and Metallica events or whatever in the game. And so they've obviously seen that, to make money in this space, you got to be able to, in this era, you got to be able to share your rights. And it looks like, it certainly looks like they're going to be part of the team. Um, I kind of do wish that they upped kind of the presentation, like a pregame presentation when you're going into a game, which would be easily skippable. If you guys remember way back, I don't know if this was the NCAA football franchise in the early 2000s, or if it was maybe the 2K series. Remember the college football 2K series when that was still a thing? Heck, there was like 3 college football games at one point. I think Sega had one. Anyway, but they did like a pregame thing, like they just kind of gave a general breakdown of what they expect in the game. It had Lee Corso, Kirk Herbstreit, and I think Chris Fowler, and it was set up like the game day stage. I was kind of expecting something like that last year because the big pitch on the return of EA Sports College Football was that they were going to make this as close to what the game day feel would be like for college football Saturday, and I kind of got that from the crowd during the game and all that type of stuff, but I didn't get it like with the presentation. Like if I'm playing a game, obviously on my television, I want the feeling of the atmosphere, but I also kind of want a television presentation of what I would be accustomed to seeing on, a college football broadcast on, CBS, ESPN, NBC, Fox, any of those things. I'd also like to see them mix things up with the announcers. And I'm sure that may be a contract thing, but like, have folks from CBS, ESPN, Fox, and NBC, calling games, depending on what's going on. Um, but that's just kind of what I want to see. And in fact, I thought that was what they used to do. I thought they mixed it up, right? Or am I just misremembering that? Because I could have sworn that was a thing. Um, anyway, that's kind of what I want to see. Um, and I didn't play it throughout the season to see what kind of updates they did during the year. You guys would be able to tell me more about that. Like, did they update like I think I'm sure they did because I remember reporting on it that they said they would update the player ratings and stuff like that as the season went along, which is great. Which obviously wasn't a thing back in the day. We didn't, we were just entering that era where you could connect your PlayStation 2 to the internet. You guys remember to play games against each other. Um, but yeah, I thought the first game, the return was great, and I'm sure this next one will be even better. But that's my one like critique, whatever. I just want more of that. If you're going to package this as a television thing in addition to the what it's like to be in the stadium, make it look like a television broadcast. Give me a little pregame thing. And the halftime, I don't know about you, but the halftime recap where it's just a voiceover, the guy in the studio was severely lacking. One, because it's just a voiceover, but also it's just obviously they have to be generic because there's just so many, but it just seemed more generic, even more so than it was back 10 years ago or 11 years ago. Yeah. Hey, Emmanuel, thanks for jumping in. Yeah, 4Vert says the old NCAA basketball games would have different networks involved with ESPN and CBS. Yeah, that makes sense. They should do that. Don't make it an ESPN game. In fact, there used to be an ESPN college football game. You guys remember that? I think that was the three games, right? It was 2K, which was Sega, I believe. EA Sports, and then ESPN had a game. I don't ESPN game had only been like a year or two. Um, was it the ESPN game that you could play with the helmet, the view from the helmet? I always struggled with that and playing that type of game. Didn't do very well in those. So okay, well, um, any other questions? Jump on in. I'm going to jump off here if I don't get any other questions here soon. Again, I didn't expect this to be very successful the very first time we got back on here, but again, it's just a slow build back up. I haven't done this in years, and my life's changed. I have a kid now, so not a lot of time. But when it's late at night and I'm not in bed yet, I try to jump on here and talk. And the setup would be better. I won't be in a hotel room on the road usually um, doing these type of things. Plus, it's April. Wish it was August, man. I say these months move so slow, but I guess the lucky thing for me in this job is that like after the May like business season, as I call it, all those meetings in the spring, June hits the calendar. You kind of get a chance to take a deep breath, maybe work on some projects, and then before you know it, media days is here in July, and it's just full tilt from there. That for like media types, and I'm sure fans too. Like the football season starts for you guys when like media days start, because then next thing you know, camp is starting up like a week or two later. What is one sleeper team from each major conference? Boy, now this is going to be off the top of my head. Also, full disclosure, I have not studied the rosters yet, and I've made it a habit now where I do not study teams and rosters fully and completely until it's May or June, usually in the June month or July, because rosters are not set. Obviously, the portal's still open. Also, I need to get actual feedback from coaches that I talk to through text and through phone calls to see what they really think about their teams, their players, how new coordinators are adapting with their new players. We all have to do rankings and top 25 and all that type of stuff in the winter, in the spring, and all that, but it's a crapshoot now because of the transfer portal. Um, and It's just so difficult. But let me give it a stab here. Surprise teams from every major conference. We'll go alphabetical order. ACC, surprise team. Let's go. I'm not sure I'm very confident in this pick, but I'll just say it anyway. I'm gonna say Virginia Tech. Why not? Um, Quarterback coming back. They've played in a lot of close games the last couple of years. They just can't get over the hump. Very big year there for the coaching staff as far as job security. So a lot on the line. I'm gonna say Virginia Tech in the ACC. Why not? Let's say that right now. Um, Big 12. Going with a numeral instead of 10 that spelled out 10. That's why I'm going Big 12 in the alphabet here. Um, Big 12. That I think is going to be an up for grabs conference once again last year. It's amazing like how well everybody kind of projected the Big 12 last year about how it was going to be the most wide open conference and you're gonna have lots of close games. And the conference sold that to fans saying you guys are gonna have close games this year. And sure enough, that's what happened. Surprise team in the Big 12. I'm gonna go with I'm going to contextualize this. I'm going to go with Oklahoma State because of just how bad Oklahoma State was last year. I don't see Mike Gundy being that bad in back-to-back years. So I'm going to go Oklahoma State. Doesn't mean they're going to contend in the Big 12. I'm just going to say that's going to be a surprise team in the Big 12. Big 10 surprise team. Is it possible to just say Penn State just because everybody expects them to fold or whatever. But I legitimately think they're a national championship contender, and I think they're going to make at least the semis again. Or make the semis. Um, but that's not a true like surprise sleeper pick. Um, Man, think, Brandon. What would be your surprise team in the Big Ten? Again, this is all me like thinking off the top of my head. I'm like trying to think of like just even the players I know on some of these teams that transferred in or out. Um, oh man, that's difficult. Big Ten surprise team. I'm gonna say it. I say it like every other year. Nebraska. Why not? Big believer in Matt Rule. So that leaves us with the SEC, right? Surprise team in the SEC. It's hard to say a blue blood would be a surprise, but I'm gonna say LSU is your sleeper team in the SEC that could surprise. I think they could contend for the SEC championship this year. Um, you know, Brian Kelly's back's against the wall. They got one of the best quarterbacks in the country returning in Garrett Nussmeier, who I'm sure is high up on the Heisman Trophy early odds list, if not at the top. I'm going to go with LSU as being that surprise team. I'm trying to remember. I only covered them in one game last year, and it was right when they were coming together so well. And I was like, man, this looks like a championship roster. And then they kind of muddled it up, you know? and it didn't work out. I'm gonna go with LSU because I mean, listen, Coach Kelly entered last year with the longest stretch of 10-win seasons, and he broke it last year. But I think they get back there this year. Let's say LSU, and they've been killing it in the transfer portal, as you guys know. It's almost like a blessing for them that they missed out on Bryce Underwood because they that quarterback he ended up going to Michigan. And so they could use all that NIL money to go help out in the transfer portal class and also with recruiting. And they killed it in the portal. So I'm gonna go with LSU. Ford Vert says maybe Illinois is a sleeper in the Big Ten. Yeah, and don't ever discount Bert, as they say, Brett Bielema. Um, I agree. Lose your running back there though. But he just always seems to have those linemen that he needs, playing that style of ball. If any coach was ever built and born to coach in a single conference and have success, and of all the conferences, it's Brett Bielema in the Big Ten. I mean, he was just built for it and very successful. And sure, I could see that as a sleeper pick. Why not? Why not? Okay. Hey, good chat. Good chat, everybody. That was fun. It's been a while. We'll get used to things. Go to cbssports.com for more college football coverage, all coverage of all athletics, all sports. It's transfer season. There's a live blog there, 247sports.com as well, live blog there. Plenty of recruiting updates, team by team updates, everything going on in the transfer portal, which schools are going to close well. The one player I would say that I've really got my freaking eyes on, and I'm so interested to see where he lands, is Trevor Pena, the receiver from Syracuse who transferred out. Like that guy, I think if there's like a slam dunk pick to be like a 1,000 yard receiver, uh, this season, almost no matter where he goes, as long as it's not a program that's running the ball 50 times a game. It's Trevor Pena, and I think he's huge. And as Fran Brown said, I'm not sure he's probably worth $2 million. As maybe as Jeremiah Smith is, which is just he's a generational receiver. But Trevor Pena is up there, and he's obviously visiting a lot of blue chip schools during this stretch. I think USC, Penn State, Miami. And by the way, how big would that be for Penn State? I mean, they never go chase after like big time receivers, especially in the portal. But if they picked him up and with as loaded as Penn State is already, and Drew Aller has another threat, especially a receiver who could legitimately be a 1,000 yard guy or maybe like an 850 to 900 yard guy in that offense, I think they'd be the favorite, right? To win the Big Ten. Also, talk about surprise teams in the Big Ten. This is not necessarily a surprise, but don't count out Michigan this year. I kind of like what they've done in the offseason. So we'll see. But anyway, that's what I'm got right now. Um, I'll catch you guys later. Hit me up.